Hello, this is Janet Gallen welcoming you to Love Letters Live. And today's guest, I'm going to just dive right in, Alison Hitchock, who runs an enormous letter writing project to patients with cancer. Is that correct?
That's exactly what my charity is about.
Okay, yeah. Why don't you talk about you and Brian and just tell us for a start how it began?
Okay, so the story actually began back in 2009 when Brian Greenley, who is the charity co-founder, and we met on a yoga holiday in India. And there was a group of 8 of us, nobody knew each other. And I think Brian thought that I was quite aloof. And I thought that Brian thought that I was quite aloof.
Oh, aloof. Oh, I didn't. Okay.
Yeah. And I thought that Brian was quite flaky. So we didn't have much in common and we didn't particularly get on. But then in the last lesson of the yoga, the holiday, we were both in headstand and we both broke wind. And we heard each other. We burst into laughter.
Goodbye for aloof.
Yeah. yes. And we realized that we had, a shared sense of humor, and so we became friends. But when we got back to the UK, we didn't really see each other very much because we both got on with our lives. And we met up just a few times for drinks. And on, I think, the second or third time we met, Brian had just been diagnosed with stage 3 bowel cancer.
My goodness.
And he came to the drinks and he wasn't going to tell me because he didn't really know me that well. But of course, the only thing in his mind was cancer. And so it came out. And of course, I felt quite awkward because I didn't know him that well and I didn't quite know what to say. So I just blurted out, I'm going to write letters to cheer you up throughout your treatment. And I don't know why I said it. I was working in the city in financial services. I wasn't a writer at all. And apparently Brian went home and he thought, well, she's a bit weird. That'll never happen. And of course, I went home and thought, oh my God, what have I done? Not only have I said that I'm going to write letters, but that they'll cheer him up. So they're going to have to be funny in some way. And what's funny about cancer? But then I thought, no, he's got cancer. All I've got to do is write a letter. And so 2 weeks later, I sat down on my couch with a glass of wine and I wrote my first letter. And that was the first of 100 letters that I wrote to him as he went through his treatment.
Okay, so I have a question about that first letter. And by the way, as far as aloof goes, I want everybody to know that Alison and I met because you found me, Alison, somehow through the internet, and we're both in the world of the power of letter writing. And you were so far from aloof. It was such a loving, warm, let's have a life together kind of an email. Thank you for finding me. I feel like I have fallen into a bag of diamonds here. Yeah. Okay. So what did you say in that first letter? How do you begin a communication like that? You don't know him well. He's got a serious challenge ahead of him.
Yeah. So I think I thought, because I didn't know anything about cancer, I didn't know anybody else who had cancer. So I thought, I'm not going to mention cancer, but I'm going to try to make him laugh. And so for the 2 weeks before that, I'd gone around with a little notebook. And if you're sitting in a cafe and somebody says something and you just think that's a little bit quirky or kooky, or you see something and you think, oh, if I just kind of put a bit of a comedy slant on that, that would make a really funny story. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I did. I kind of collected these anecdotes of things that I'd done or seen or heard, and just put them into a letter to him, because all I wanted to do was distract him from what he was going through. At that time, he was going for radiotherapy every week. Mm-hmm. And I thought, if I can just distract him and just connect him back to the normal world, then at least he'll have a moment when he's not consumed with cancer.
Isn't that wonderful? Okay, so that's a big question. Like, how do you start a letter to a stranger who's in trouble?
Yeah.
And you didn't talk about him, and you didn't talk about cancer. You just talked about life.
Yeah.
That's okay, because Well, I have a couple of questions, but so talk about how this evolved into, you've written what, 25,000 letters, your department of letters?
So yeah, so we set up the charity. Brian got well again. His cancer moved to stage 4, but in 2013 he was given the all clear and has been clear ever since.
Miracle times, yes.
Yeah, we set up the charity initially to inspire and educate other people that cancer is a very isolating illness. And people going through treatment are often not at work. They're not at the school gates anymore. Friends move away from them because they don't know what to say to them. And also in Brian's case, he had lots of family and friends, but he found himself removing himself because he didn't want their pity, and he had nothing to talk about apart from cancer.
Okay.
So people can become really isolated. So we wanted people to understand that that's something that happens to a friend who's living with cancer, and that you can still connect, and it can be as easy as writing a letter. So that was how we started off. And then we started our Donate a Letter program.
Now, how does that work?
So that's where people from all around the world write anonymous letters. They send them to us. They
send them to you in an envelope.
Yeah.
Is there handwritten? Okay, good.
Yeah, handwritten letters in an envelope. It comes to our PO box. We read them, and then we repackage them, and we distribute them to cancer patients in hospitals and cancer centres and in hospices, and then to people in their own homes as well.
What are the best ones talk about to strangers from? So nobody signs them.
They sign them, but they sign them just with their first name. So there's nothing in the letter that can identify the person. So you might talk about your grandchildren or your dog or yourself, and you might, or your town, but there won't be anything. You won't give your full name. You won't give your email address. So there's nothing in the letter that can identify you. So privacy is completely intact.
Yeah.
And of course, then that means that the person receiving it doesn't write back
and doesn't have to.
No, it has no obligation.
Feel obligated. Oh, that's wonderful.
Because Brian never wrote back to me. So we were in touch with a text or a phone call, but he said, I have nothing to tell you other than, I've had some more chemo or I've had some more surgery. And so he didn't want to write a letter, but my letters to him were the thing that was really, really important. So we now have, this year we'll distribute 10,000 letters. Last year we distributed 10,000 letters.
Do you want to give your PO box so people listening to this might want to join in? How do we?
Yeah, so the best way to get involved is to go onto our website, and you can sign up to become a writer. And that is www.frommetouletters.co.uk.
Okay, so but also if we go on to whatever search engine we have, we can just write from me to you.
Yeah, so if you put in from me to you, first of all, you get the Beatles.
Oh, okay.
But if you scroll down, you find us.
What's the whole thing? From me to you letters?
Yeah, but if you put in from me to you letters, then we're there.
And we'll get to you. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, very easily. And of course, and people can request to receive letters as well through the website from anywhere in the world.
This is just huge and amazing, and I am so happy to meet you. My hat's off to you for what you are doing. I do want to know, well, let's talk about handwriting for a minute. Because, a lot of things get sent email or printed out on a computer. And, I'm big on handwriting. I think handwriting is kind of the fingerprint of the heart, and nobody has your handwriting. But another thing that I have felt, and you tell me what you think, when you get a letter that's handwritten, you're touching something that somebody else has touched.
Yeah.
It's kind of like holding hands across, well, I'm in California and you're in London, so holding hands halfway across the world.
I think it's that now with all digital communication, there's no sense of touch involved anymore.
That's right.
It's the only thing that has a sense of touch. And you're quite right. If you print something off, you haven't spent time touching it, holding it. All you've probably
Right.
done is fold it.
Right. Well, maybe before you mail it off, and
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Well,
But the other,
go
I
ahead.
was going to say the other lovely thing is that people go out and they choose beautiful
Oh,
stationery.
let's talk about that. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so stationery choice is enormous, and there's so much beautiful stationery. So in my world of love letters, we talk about choosing stationery that really reflects you.
Mm.
That's a possibility. If you're a florist, for example, I mean, there's beautiful flowered stationery. Same with the envelope.
Yeah.
And if you're writing to somebody and for example, they had a history of playing soccer, it doesn't matter. There is all kinds of stationery that's appropriate. And you're right, it shows that you took the time.
Yeah. And I think what's really nice, if you're writing to somebody you don't know, it's a really nice mix of, so you choose some stationery that perhaps you think you would like to receive or that reflects something about you. But
Right.
you also take that moment to wonder who might like this piece of stationery. So you don't just pick up any old card that's in the bottom of your drawer.
Right.
Because you kind of want to be quite proud and you want that person to feel they've got some kind of gift, even though you don't know them.
Yes.
So we find that people send amazingly beautiful stationery, but loads of people make their own.
Oh, okay. If people can do that, yes.
Yes, yeah. And the envelope art, people send their stuff in envelopes and they just draw and write beautiful, beautiful things on there.
Embellishing the envelope. It's, what? The truth is, though, a letter is a gift.
Yeah, yeah. The whole thing is a gift.
Right. It's a gift from one person to
Mhm.
one person
Yeah.
on this earth. And, you're right. I see the envelope as a gift wrap. So yes, embellishing it. Yes. And then that letter, do you use the same envelope that we send to you?
So what people tend to do is they will write their letter or their card or whatever. Then they'll put it into a blank envelope, which they may decorate themselves. And then they put all of that into an envelope that they send to us, because obviously we can't use the one that we've opened.
Oh, okay. So that's good to tell people, for us to know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Send
Yeah.
your letter to this person in a blank envelope, but you can embellish it how you want around
Yeah.
but you leave the address free for you to fill it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And some people will put in tea bags in there because they like the thought that somebody might make themselves a cup of tea while they're reading. Or they might put in, it's quite popular that people will put seeds, flower seeds in the hope that somebody will, plant those. And that's a very kind of,
by the way, what an act of faith that is.
yes, exactly.
Even planting something, planting something that you are aware you may never see.
But somebody will.
Somebody will, and you may.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a very hopeful future thing.
Wonderful.
So people will write poems, they'll put poems in, they'll put their favorite quotes in.
Okay, good suggestions. All of these favorite quotes. Yes.
Yeah. So
And
I think
there's kind of a line between, I don't know how you really would define that, between being encouraging and saying something inappropriate.
Yeah. So we always emphasize to people that you don't know the prognosis of the person that you're writing to.
Right.
But if you imagine you're writing to a friend and don't imagine they have cancer, just write to a friend. Don't talk about cancer, don't talk about religion, don't talk about miracles, don't talk about prayers, because you don't know their faith or where they are. But just write something that is uplifting and joyful and simple. I mean, the kind of more
connecting to people as human beings who would like to say hello and share a little something.
Yeah.
And you're not obligated to say the thing that's going to make them feel 100% better.
No, because you can't. You never can.
Now, there's a difference also, because in what I do, there's also letter writing to people. We had a whole program of writing to people who are terminally ill.
Mm-hmm.
And people are so often afraid to do that because they don't know what to say.
Yes, and some of our letters go to hospices.
Uh-huh.
But when you're writing for the donate a letter program, you don't know if your letter will go to a hospice or a hospital. That could go to somebody who's terminally ill. We tend to find that when the letters go to hospices, the people who work there will always read them first, and they will choose who they go to.
Okay.
But again, it's when you're writing, you're kind of sharing that moment.
Yes.
With them, and you're not really asking them about future stuff, because you don't know their prognosis of anybody that you're writing to. But you might be asking them, you might be telling them about a memory that you've got of perhaps a childhood holiday or something, and you might be saying, what's your favorite memory of a childhood holiday? And so you're taking them into their past, into something.
Okay. Thank you. I want to talk about that. I was going to head into that, because writing a letter to someone you know that you're friends with who's terminally ill, people are afraid to say something that sounds like a goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
Now, first of all, there's nothing wrong with a goodbye if the other person is, has accepted this.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another issue. Long before love letters, I had a very dear friend who had stomach cancer. And 3 of us went to visit her. We brought lunch. She was propped up on the sofa. She was really near the end herself. And she was very beautiful. And she was skin and bones. I mean, she was just skeletal looking. There was skin stretched over her skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
She was the color of chalk. And we came in. And at the front door, one of the women said to me, I have a letter that I wrote her about us when we were young. Could I read it to her? I said, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And she did. And this woman who had been propped up, and I say was the color of chalk and looked really grim in her, was listening to this letter. And it was just such a moment. She started to laugh at a couple of things. Actual laughing at the memories, and color came into her cheeks.
How wonderful.
Color came into her cheeks, and she was smiling and laughing. And I realized something, that this actual letter was not a goodbye. This was a letter of hello to us in our youth, and what the power that it had for that moment. It took her back to her strongest self. And she got to live in that for the rest of that time we were there. Yes.
Yeah. That's a beautiful, beautiful story.
It was amazing.
And that's exactly what Brian said with my letters. They transported him to a different place.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I wasn't talking about Brian and I, our memories, but I was talking about things that we, that everybody has in common. So,
let's talk about that. Tell us the things that everybody has in common.
Well, we all have a disastrous first date in common, I think. We all have a pet that we either had as a child or we've got now who just means the world to us. We had a lovely letter from a lady who was writing about her childhood holidays, and she said she lived in one part of the country, and her uncle would every year, he would drive them to the seaside, and the car would be packed and he'd be there driving. And she said when they arrived, he would always have blisters on his hands because he was such a nervous driver, and he had a car packed with his family that he'd grabbed onto the steering wheel so hard that he got blisters. We've all got a story like that. We've all got a story of a haircut that we should never have had, or a piece of clothing that we can't throw away.
Yeah.
Or a kindness that's been done to us at some time, or a visit to a city that, changed us.
Yes.
I mean, they're just, and I find it's the smaller the thing in life, the more it resonates.
Okay, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
And
so the person who just writes about the fact that they've just eaten a beautiful apple, and it's taking them back to when their grandparents had an orchard and they'd collect the apples and then they'd try and eat them and they'd be full of wasps. And, you know, that's a beautiful story of a childhood that's come from just the fact that they wanted to tell you they've just eaten a beautiful tasting apple.
Your point about the small things in life, I've noticed, and I think this is probably true of all of us, that we, even in problem solving and looking at the world, and the small things we can feel powerful over. The small things we can understand, the small things we can solve.
Yeah.
You know, that haircut we should never have had, well, let it grow out. I mean, the huge things in the world that are troublesome now, we cannot solve as one individual acting alone. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just so wonderful. Now, is it, if somebody gets a letter that talks about that apple in the orchard, can that person, if he or she wants to, write back? Is there some way or no?
So we trialed that because recipients said that they wanted to have that facility. So we trialed it. And what we found is that very few actually wrote back.
Yes.
So what we say is, if you want to write back, instead write forward. So we had one lady who received a letter in hospital and she wrote 20.
To other people.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and isn't that an empowering thing?
Yeah. So we get that quite a lot. And we also get the family members of people who have received a letter. They will then write for Donate a Letter because they've seen the impact that a letter has had on their mum or their cousin or whatever.
Have you received letters in your life that had huge impact?
So, yes, I think I'm just trying to think. So I think the time when letters had the biggest impact on my life was when, so in the early 90s, I lived in Japan for a couple of years. And so there was no internet. Telephone calls were still really expensive.
Right.
And I lived on my own in a tiny little town, which was an amazing experience. But of course, I had nothing. It was rural Japan, and I had nothing that felt like home at all. And so my mailbox by the gate became my kind of like the thing that, you know, when I came home from work, it would be, have I got a letter today? And I think because I would explain to people at home about my existence there, people started to understand that the thing that they could do for me, or the thing that would bring me the most happiness, would be to write me a letter. Nice. So I was there for 2 years. And so over the time that I was there, I would have nearly a letter arriving every day in my mailbox.
So the connection, you know, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking, so in my childhood, the mailman was critical part of our life. You know, and I was actually dating a man that I eventually married. And we lived in separate cities, and we wrote pretty much every single day to each other. And when the mailman, I'd be sitting at the window, you know, like a dog looking out the window, waiting for the mailman. And as he would walk up the street, he would either go, or on a couple of occasions where I didn't have a letter, he was so involved in my love life.
Yeah.
He gave me a little, letter writing. It's just a wonderful thing. And I was going to say something and ask what you think. There are some people who really can't write out a whole letter by hand for reasons of their own physical limitations, as a rule. And doing it on a word processor is easier.
Yeah.
So I have encouraged people to do that if they have to, but then sign it in their own handwriting. And maybe a little PS or something, so that we know that someone has been there. Anybody can forge a letter on a computer.
Yeah, so we get that. And so we say to people, kind of really select your font so that it's not Arial, or, you know, so that the font is soft. Sign it by hand, but also, if you can, just do little doodles.
Yes. Okay. Let somebody know that a real person who cares about you was there. Exactly.
Yes. And the doodles give a little bit of you away as well. You know, kind of unbeknown to us, our doodles mean something about us, and that says something to the person who's receiving it.
Oh, so does your kind of handwriting. Of course, handwriting analysis is a whole other wonderful.
Yes.
too much to really take on now. But I want to thank you for doing this with me.
Well, thank you.
So I'm going to join in this effort, and I'm going to be sending a letter or two to you.
Will you? Thank you so much. Thank you.
Will.
There's lots on our website. There's lots of tips.
Okay. And your tips are great. And I'm guessing that this is kind of all new to you, all these insights about writing letters.
Well, yeah, because until I wrote to Brian,
right.
I didn't write letters. I hadn't written letters for years, probably since I lived in Japan. But actually what I wrote to Brian was just me. It was, so once we started the charity, I'm really kind of finding out about which letters really resonated. And
I can hear that. Everything out of your mouth is solid gold.
Yeah. And but it's been an education, but it's been a real insight into how people connect. And how, as we talked about the little thing, how people connect with the little things, and it doesn't need to be big gestures. The tiny things are the things.
That a lot. I like that a lot. And it also takes the responsibility off of your shoulders to have to say something huge and important.
Yes, and it never needs to be that.
Thank you. You'll hear from me. Let me just say again, thank you. I'm so glad we met. You make my heart sing. And also, if there's anything else that you'd like to come back to Love Letters Live for another episode, that's something in particular that you'd like to share, or even whatever it is, you let me know.
Okay? I will. Thank you.
Yes. And I want to say one more thing. People don't throw these letters away. People keep letters.
Yeah.
People keep, after people pass away, it is, families find boxes of these letters. And it has been, not that it's relevant here really, but I've had the experience in my, work in this area, that not uncommon for people to take one particular letter and have it be part of the eulogy.
Yeah.
That's a really, Love Letters Live. They just go on forever and ever. Okay, thank you. I'm going to let you go because it's probably, it's dinner time for you in London, right?
It is. Okay. But thank you so much. It's been a joy to talk to you. Thank you.
Ditto, same for me. I know that we'll be connected forever. Okay, thank you, dear.
Bye-bye.
Bye.